What I'd love for you guys to do is just think of some things either as remarks to or questions about the conversations that we've been having here so far today.
Come on,
who wants to go
us.
first?
We can take it.
Don't make me call on you guys.
Those lights are really bright.
So who's got a question for these gentlemen?
Down in front.
Ah, there you go. Great.
Thanks for leading it off.
Robert, you mentioned you chose a Cumulo over Hadoop. Could you go into some detail why?
Cumulo sits over Hadoop.
Okay.
Okay, that was it. Wow.
Hey, try to make all the questions as simple as that. It makes it easier for me.
I have a simple question, but I might get a difficult answer. A lot of the discussion that all three of you did was focused on discovery sciences. But really, to be impactful, we got to get to diagnostics and practice, and there's a huge set of barriers there. And the other thing is, how do we overlay the economic models on here to be able to drive the technology developments?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the American healthcare system was architected by a number of different influences, one of which was to prevent snake oil salesmen. And what that was the idea that people would sell cures that did nothing, extracted money from people, and made false hope. And you know, it's hard to fight that. Frankly, every biomedical effort that I've ever looked at early on, I feel that it has some degree of snake oil quality to it because they really don't know. The complexity is so high that it doesn't have the surety that we have in electronics, where you begin to say, well, I can build a computer in 3 years' time because of Moore's law and other things. Yeah. You know, it'll ship with such and such a product. And we can't get there with biology, right? With biology, a lot of it is hope and guessing.
Right. I can add a little bit to this one. So part of what I do at GNS, I'm not on the biology side of the house, but I don't deal with data that's that big, but I'm still doing big data analytics, and it's actually to try to help address some of what you're talking about. There really is a lack of evidence with respect to some of the economic models, and so we're doing some big data things, and I think that other people in this audience are as well. I've met some people at the break from Archimedes. But the bottom line is, how many have ever heard the name Atul Gawande? You familiar with that? He's a writer, he's a surgeon, he writes for the New Yorker, and he has these wonderful articles, usually about twice a year, some really interesting topic in healthcare. And at one time when he wrote, it was called The Cost Conundrum. This was about 1.5 years ago. And he said, you know, if you're building a house and you decide that you're going to pay an electrician based on the number of outlets that go into your house, all right, how many outlets do you think you're going to have? Okay, a lot. And so the economic models, in fact, are changing. All right, they are changing not because of big data analytics, but they're changing for other reasons, be it reform-related or budgetary pressures or whatever. And yet what a lot of these entities need are analytic models that actually help them understand, I don't need 3,000 outlets, I need about 10. Where do I need them? And to do that in a data-driven way. And that's where I think you can begin to accelerate some of the changes that are being made, number one. Number two, you can make them sustainable so that the changes that they make will survive.
I think I have a, yeah. So I got very upset about the kind of hypothesis-driven motivation behind your question about 1 year ago and fired off a 20-page blog post. That's what I rant via blogs rather than at people personally. And I think I like the distinction between discovery-driven and data-driven. And I think we need to figure out how to use the data more effectively. But again, leaping to the idea that we need to immediately be able to interpret the data in the context of specific hypotheses is probably one of the most damaging legacies of the molecular biology tradition in both funding and in data gathering, to the point where you see students saying, well, I don't know what the answer is going to be, but my hypothesis is this incredibly boring, stupid, dull hypothesis because I can defend it in their thesis proposals, in their grant proposals. And it's just, in an age where you can go sequence potentially 1 million genomes at the drop of a hat, which I think we'll be at in 3 or 4 years, you know, why on earth would you try and predict what you're going to find before you do it? It just doesn't strike me as a good model.
But the methodology for hypothesis-free investigation is not well-founded, right? That is, in some sense, a novel approach that we're going to just look at the data without sequencing. Yeah.
Let me just throw out a challenge. So to answer this question, so here's the challenge. I mean, clearly from your talk, we're in a crisis. Something has to break. So that's number one. Out there in the world, some of the most sophisticated analytics at scale, at the petabyte scale, is being done in computational advertising. Some people would argue, and I've stopped making these arguments, that that may not be the most important discipline for the future of humanity. So here's the challenge. We have the ability for the people in this audience to move from areas like computational advertising because of this crisis to something important like understanding how to make more sense of biology, medicine, and healthcare. So I would turn it around to you. This is an opportunity. What can you do in the audience about this?
Mm-hmm. Why don't you make the economics of the computational biology as attractive as the computational advertising?
I think that would be an interesting thing to do. I mean, one way of looking at it, it's a $1 trillion economy in healthcare. So there are lots of ways to pull out $1 billion from $1 trillion.
Well, that's fine, but it is driven by the economics. That's the only point. And so the computation will follow the money.
I don't disagree.
So the model, the model I'm attracted to is the model that we've seen in the cell phone world, and where there's an app for that, right? Run apps, charge an overhead for the vendor of the platform to charge and make money off of an overhead of that, and for the users, the payers, to gravitate to the most cost-effective and most efficient and the most attractive, whatever those attractive virtues are, applications. Some of them are going to be useful, and some of them are going to be rubbish, and the market dynamics will begin to drive that. And I think that the notion of an apps platform in bioinformatics is not alone in talking about this. I think it's one that's attractive. The flip side is, what is the platform, and how do we, because the platform has got to be at an extraordinarily high quality level, and it has to have incredible utility, and has to be achieve a certain penetration for it to have virtues. And this is what we saw in iPhone and what we see in other platforms. iPhone was not the first smartphone app platform. It's the first one to reach a certain sufficient level, and it's not the last one, right? So to me, that there's a metaphor and a model there, an economics model. Sorry. I guess I'm saying something important.
Yeah, sure. So it's not that we have an answer on your question about economy for computational biology, but I think our earlier presentation showed that there are a lot of similarities, irrespectively of what kind of field of life sciences you're talking about. We recently started with help of Moore Foundation, and we have Chris Manzik sitting right there, who helped us to get started. It's called Data-Enabled Life Sciences Alliance. delsaglobal.org, check it out. It's not that we have answers, but we started talking about how to bring economy of scale, how to find similarities across all these different siloed disciplines, because we always compete, and we have one PI, one lab equals to one problem kind of mentality. How to overcome it, we're going to compete, but how to collaborate across disciplines. And maybe there would be economy of scale for big brothers, okay? So we started asking those questions. With regard to healthcare, as much as I'm doing genomics, and I'm really passionate about that, I think the issue not going to come and solution not going to come from that angle. I think, unless we're going to change fee-for-service to, fee-for-value kind of model in healthcare, we're going to be stuck in where we are right now. And it's not just fee-for-value, but because of whatever happening with budgets, we need to decrease costs and increase outcomes. That would be paradigm change if it would be. So if you look at, for example, how much Europeans pay for the same kind of quality outcome healthcare, they pay 2.5 times less than in the US, for example.
So back to the economics, and I think Ted or one of you made the comment about your addictive little Fitbit that wanders around with you and reports back. The app in your iPhone, the Fitbit on your belt, I think that's a important distinction between tomorrow's data gathering and yesterday's data gathering. That I'm happy to give $100, $200 to, Fitbit.org or Kickstarter. Really cool gizmo. $500 to get my genome into a public database. That's not that far off. I wouldn't give the money to the government. I probably wouldn't give it to my doctor because I'm not sure my doctor has any clue what to do with that. But these new technologies are going to open up a big flood of big data, and that's going to be the interesting thing. How do we manage that? How do we not lock it up in a Fitbit private proprietary database, but make that information available to researchers someplace? Anyways, just a comment on that topic.
Is data portability important to you? I'm curious.
Yes.
So the ability
I want my doctor to be able to use my Fitbit data to say why I'm having high blood pressure, or not.
Yeah, I think I just want to second that. I think you said it extremely well, and I think we're seeing the utility as we go from these billion-dollar instruments to these 100,000 to these $100. 10 million people with $100 to instrument and self-track them would provide a bit of knowledge that would be revolutionary. And I'm really glad you said that.
Question. It seems in each of your talks there was a real emphasis on design patterns around some of the infrastructure being used to tackle these big data problems in bioinformatics, and perhaps even some of the software architectures, distributed systems architectures. To Ted's point of an app ecosystem emerging around bioinformatics, how much of an opportunity is visualization creating in that? I mean, it seems like Apple's iPhone made a huge audience by making it more accessible to a broader audience, and there were some jokes about heat maps here. But to what extent are there design patterns around visualization?
It's a very good question, and I think visualization is huge. The physicians are, I don't remember if it's right brain or left brain, they're very visual-oriented people. The way they learn in medical school is in cartoon, schematic thinking, and one can obviously process an enormous amount of data with the right visualization to make the right points. So very huge, making use of this. My heat maps are simple. I think we have a great opportunity to begin to create a visual language oriented to interpret these masses of data in. And I think similarly for the lay public who are not trained in probability theory and what does p-value of 0.05 mean? Why is that only barely sufficient? Would you get in a car that was proven only with to get you there 19 out of 20 times? I don't think so, right? And yet that's the standard by which we make medical decisions today. So I think there's a huge opportunity here to bring visualization and metaphor into this discourse so that we're making better decisions, both to the medical community and to the medical consumer.
I have a very simple experiment to people who have access to visualization technology. A number of us put papers up there about how we understand the mechanisms of cancer. The New York Times had this article about ENCODE. For anyone who wants to understand the impact of visualization where they do nothing today, or almost nothing, most of those consortiums have weekly calls called the Analysis Working Group calls. A bunch of people get on a phone call. They spread PowerPoint around before. They're talking about things that are barely understandable to them.
Yeah.
They're trying to do things that we just don't know how to wire together.
Right.
There's, from the viewpoint of what you could do with visualization, that to me, just giving a few of those groups tools to visualize things that they're now don't really have the mechanisms to do could dramatically change how they do these basic discoveries. And that would be a simple thing. And if you did it for one group and it sort of they're all very competitive. I guess it's the only field in science that's competitive, but I'm sure the other groups would do it after a while.
So two slightly tangential responses. One is, if anybody can figure out how to make collaboration technology actually work, it would revolutionize, well, most of science, I think, but in particular, these phone calls are extraordinarily painful. The other comment is you said, oh, cyber infrastructure, machines, algorithms, approaches, right? And I think, most of us, I assume, are techies of some sort or another. And I think we're sort of focused on the wrong, we're always like to focus in on awesome cyber infrastructure and programming and computers and stuff. And I was at an NSF cyber infrastructure meeting where the NSF said, oh, we're spending all this money on cyber infrastructure and biology. They're not really, but they're spending a big portion of their budget at any rate. And what does everybody in the room think is the problem? And the problem isn't just that there isn't enough cyber infrastructure, it's that nobody knows how to use it that actually has the questions. So I really think there's this really significant undercurrent of the lack of education in anything around this. I mean, you probably, between the groups and people that we collaborate with, you probably have somewhere between 30 and 40% of the people in the US that work in bioinformatics and computational biology represented.
Huge number.
And it's sort of crazy that we're not doing, the incentives aren't aligned and the educational approaches aren't developed for figuring out how to train the next generation of biologists. And it's incredibly depressing to watch from the perspective of a professor at a university.
By the way, you made a comment before that I'm going to disagree with. One of the things in your talk, I actually feel incredibly respected by the medical field. I feel like they have hit the wall, and they have come to bioinformaticists with their hat in hand. Please give me some attention. I have this enormous data set that I cannot comprehend, I cannot cope with. And so at least in the biomedical community, right, there's certainly competition for bioinformatic help. I'm sure as you go further and further away from that into mainstream biology, that relationship is not as well built. But there has in the last 5 years.
So there's a couple key differences between us. One is that you're currently a graduate student.
Yes.
And you're working for with David Hausler. Yes. At a center of computational biology. Mm-hmm. And so you attract that kind of attention. The other thing is you're not yet facing a promotion and tenure committee.
There was that.
and at a place that's not a medical school. And so I definitely see it changing, but it hasn't yet trickled down in terms of the incentives for this stuff. And so I think you're not going to get the next generation only a few institutions at a time.
Okay. We've got a question. This gentleman here in the white shirt. What do you think of the new data science curriculum at the universities?
Again, there may be a difference between what schools are doing it and which ones. At Santa Cruz, it was an early adopter of bioinformatics. I think one of the interesting things is different schools, the bioinformatics and biomedical informatics comes out of different disciplines. So in my school, it came out of computer science. Out of Stanford, it came out of the electronic health record, biomedical informatics system, and the biochemistry departments. But of course, there's the attraction to from one side of the house to the other, and I think it can be excellent, but I'm sure it's far from uniform, right? And I think there's a great many schools that have rushed into bioinformatics without having the depth of resources they need to really do it well.
They look great from a distance.
Question?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I've got one.
Test. Going back to the earlier question about bringing talent from computational advertising into bioinformatics, and setting aside the macroeconomics that we were discussing, let's just say hypothetically somebody is an expert at computational advertising, and they wanted to make a shift into supporting more, doing more with a career in bioinformatics, and they have a family and a house and all here in Silicon Valley. What's the steps to make a transition into this field?
Yeah.
Because I hear this a lot.
So at least in Silicon...
Great question.
Yeah. In Silicon Valley, I can tell you that the UC Santa Cruz Extension Program, which is a, UC Silicon Valley, has a good certificate program in bioinformatics. And I think that is an excellent start. The best employers in the field are in the pharmaceutical companies, right? They're the ones that will pay at a scale similar to Silicon Valley companies. Universities are not paying at the same scale. I'm shocked. Right? You're probably not, but I'm shocked that the same job description, the same talent will work for half as much. And so I think university research is clearly not a place to pay for a Silicon Valley house. The rest of the country maybe a little bit, maybe a little better. I don't know.
I was actually going to suggest you sell your house in Silicon Valley. You move to Michigan, you buy 3 houses there and use the differential to fund your company for 20 years.
Well,
by the way, I went to grad school at Caltech, so I'm familiar with the real estate. That's how we bought our house. And
I just want to make this. I actually think it's a pretty interesting opportunity. There's 2 different cultures. There's the culture of the bioinformatician, which is extremely important, but one aspect of this. And then there's the culture of the people who are working, the wet lab people, the people working on the medical side. And there's such a need for expertise on the latter that if you go and attach yourself to one of those, A, you'll learn something, and B, you can have an impact. And it's always nice to be in a situation where you can learn something and have an impact and be desperately needed. Yep. So, if for the people out here, there are lots of ways to make this work, but, I think that's a really interesting opportunity. The field is in a bifurcation point. It's never been easier, I think, to have an impact just because they're now surrounded by a bunch of things that they don't quite understand. So the field, has all this data. They don't quite understand it. They have a need for the people who have the skills. It's sort of a perfect triple point of things that people can have an impact on.
So you're totally right. There's the nonprofit perspective, and it's great, and I understand it. But so much of what medicine is doing is making a bundle of money. And so much of what computational advertising is doing is making a bundle of money. The way to get this to move computational medicine forward is to figure out how that makes a bundle of money. Now, one of the
sounds like you're volunteering.
No, I'm not. I'm just observing, right? I got a day job. It's fine, right? And so, but the issue for me is HIPAA in the way? If you look at computational advertising, and I'm not complaining about HIPAA. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not. But the whole issue of DPII-ing things is really valuable. Because if you look at what happens in things like Google and Bing and the other competitors, they're out there and they're looking at a corpus of stuff which is public data. And then they use that to get a whole ton of knowledge. And then against that, they use personal tracking of what you've looked at in order to do your concierge services of giving you exactly what you want. That's strongly parallel to what we were seeing a few minutes ago in terms of the medical analysis of cancers and so forth. But what I'm seeing is missing is the feedback loop of computational investment in the large corpus of knowledge. How can we depersonalize that knowledge and create an economic incentive to gain huge amount of money than to tap a little bit of money every time someone wants to do a single medical analysis? That's just drawing the computational advertising parallel. What are your thoughts on that?
She's going to answer. I think that's a great way to phrase the question.
So for me, two points I think are relevant here. Number one is pick a good problem to start with. Right, and so what I would say is go pick a problem that when you apply and when applying demonstrate that you can use big data to not only forward the field but improve health and save money. That's a good problem. That's right. So you're really trying to hit the trifecta, and those problems are out there. but they're not everywhere. And so you really need to understand where you can hit that sweet spot. All right, so that's point number one. Point number two, I used to sit on the National Committee for Vital and Health Statistics, and I'm no longer there, but some of my friends still do. And what they said was interesting regarding HIPAA, and I've got a lot of scar tissue from HIPAA and all that kind of stuff. But they're actually rethinking it, which is not to say it's going to go anywhere overnight. It's not going to dissolve. But they recognize that HIPAA's constraints of what it means to de-identify data isn't really going to work in a big data world. Think about a hyperdimension cube. Any cell with fewer than 5 people in it is going to get eliminated from the database. Pretty soon, enough said, databases will be null sets. And they're starting to see that that is not going to apply. Another point with respect to HIPAA, a lot of HIPAA and data should be secure. I think more people are making sure to recognize that security and privacy are different. All right, more conversations around that. But I also think that I see conversations on the Hill and in policy circles where there's a lot more paranoia than with individuals. So I think a lot of it is getting rethought, I guess is my point. And so with respect to HIPAA, I also think that there are just different things that you can do, even within a data science frame, to actually analyze data while it's fully encrypted. So I think that there's a lot of things that we don't know yet, you know, that are going to change the landscape of HIPAA. But HIPAA, at the end of the day, will not be in the way, and it hasn't been for the work that I've done. Mm-hmm.
It's an inherent conflict in the current architecture of the data.
Right.
But realize that this at least is one which much of the data, an enormous volume of data, that is certainly something that if you were I don't know, let's call yourself a data prospector, right? There's an enormous corpus of data already out there, ready, waiting, and unanalyzed, right? Terabytes and terabytes of it that can be analyzed with no charge, freely downloaded from government and public sources. And a great many private institutions put their data into the public domain, hoping that you will come along and do this. It's not simple to access, and obviously there's a learning curve to approach it. But Carol is exactly right. We are in an area where we do need a new technology, which allows us to analyze things that we don't necessarily have access to the details of. And I think, for example, companies like Salesforce.com and SAP have shown us the way that you can actually have large information systems where you can ask queries, but you can't see individual records of details, but you can get bad aggregate answers. And I think that's really exciting. And it's something which, should also be part of the XLDB experience, where you have a database that if you knew the exact details of individual records, you would be violating privacy. But aggregating corpus of information is perfectly acceptable. And that's a technology that is not built into any database system that I know of.
Okay, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Since I work for a company that builds stuff, and one of the challenges that I see coming up where the world is, the computation world is running down a highway trying to get to exascale by the end of the decade here, or soon afterwards. And at that point, you'll be able to have computing, 5 cores worth of computing for 20 milliwatts if you're able to put up an exascale data center for 20 megawatts. That's a huge amount of computing, even by today's ability. And 20 milliwatts is about the amount of power you can get out of a living human animal. It seems to me that there's a lot of future computation that can be done that would bring even bigger challenges to the table. Where do you guys see as the real next set of drivers for designing processors and software and algorithms that need to be done in order to get beyond your current 1 million genomes?
You mean What's beyond 1 million genomes? Is what you're saying? So 1 million genomes is what you could do in the next 3 to 4 years? Yeah. You know, I haven't thought a lot about it. I'm actually focused a lot on how to do 1 million genomes. I actually don't have anything thoughtful to say about it. It is kind of interesting to me, you know, having been in the HPC world for a bit, the focus on roadmaps to the next sort of level. For whatever reason, and I think XLDB plays a really important role, there's a little less of that on the data science community. And I don't know why. It sounds like an interesting opportunity for conferences like this.
When the microphone is on. Okay, so one of the reasons we organized the XLDB and one of the activities we are doing is collecting use cases. And we've been relatively slow with that for manpower reasons, and I'll mention it tomorrow. But we are bringing new communities and we are trying to understand how they are doing things, what they are doing, how the data look like, what's the access patterns. So we are planning to go ahead with collecting many more use cases from the communities we are reaching to, and publish those and make them available to all of you. So if you have any particular way of looking at those use cases, let us know. If you want an input related to hardware requirements, that's good to know, because we can structure the questions for those who will be giving us use cases in a certain way that will help you understand what they need. So definitely talk to us, and we will try to extract this information and find commonalities and hopefully, you know, improve both hardware and software for the next generation. And let's use the microphones because we are videotaping, so that helps.
So just a quick answer to your question. So something suggested by George Church, who is kind of he's the Michael Stonebreaker of bioinformatics, and he suggested that, you know, not only are we're well past the idea of a $1,000 genome, we're on to free genome sequencing, and where it will be essentially built into our personal devices and our clothes. And so the question is, you know, it will be, you know, so cheap and so automatic and so much on the fly that it will be that, you know, we won't need to store it, right? We'll simply, you know, sequence and compute on it as we experience the environment in the natural world. And so what would you do with that data, right? You walk around the room, you see, oh, he's got a cold, oh, he's got the flu, oh, he's got this birth defect, oh, he's got, I mean, just an enormous amount of information, which, you know, could you use that? Could it be integrated in some interesting way? Can it be said, you know, in the same sense of, gee, if you're, you know, younger and you're looking for somebody who's attractive, right? Sequence them as you walk by them, right? You know, one can imagine.
What would our kids look like?
What would our kids look like? You know, have a rendering on the fly, right? What's in the soil? You know. I, like many people, went to Yosemite this summer. Oh, there's huntavirus there. Better check out of this cabin, move into another one, right? You know, there's an enormous variety of data which we take for granted, which we, you know, can't even acknowledge now, but which, you know, today on your cell phone, you're fed with real-time traffic update, what, you know, which direction is north, all kinds of information which we don't normally experience in the without these devices. So there's clearly an architecture to be built and designed, but we're not there yet, right? You know, that idea is still, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years out, but not an enormous amount, right? Not 20 years away. And so I think having an enormous amount of computation resources and the ability to sense on the fly and use this data, especially in our interface to the natural world, right? So soil, right? You know, I don't do things at your scale. I have a garden in Los Altos, right? And what do I do with that garden in Los Altos? You know, what's depleted in the soil?
It has more than 1 gram of soil.
It has more than 1 gram of soil.
Yeah, that's right.
So the one thing I wanted to mention is as computing capabilities get ever more complex, biological principles of utilization of information and control systems really become much more relevant in the design process. And so what I'm here trying to do is understand and be able to capture some of those basic principles that translate across biology into engineering and physics.
So the last, I'll give a 30-second, not so thoughtful response off the cuff, is just I get the impression that the heterogeneity of the data, source of the data and the many data sources and integration across those sources is going to be more important than one big ultra-scalable database, right? Many people are going to be generating the data. Many people are going to be querying the data. They're going to be all over the place. And I don't think that much about hardware, but I would bet that we don't know how to do that very well at either a hardware or a software level.
Okay. Who else has a question?
I've got one. Robert, you mentioned, or you brought up the term big data scalable. So that implies there's big data problems that are not big data scalable. And maybe this is, I guess from my perspective, the way most solutions to big data have been architected is you take a vast amount of data and you split it up amongst many iterative systems, shared nothing systems. What you end up with is 10,000 small data stores. And then as long as whatever your algorithm is, 99% of the computation is done within each silo, and all that comes out to the top and needs to be collected for the final result is a very small amount of that information, you're fine. But if you ever have any kind of algorithms where you need to compare each little bit of data with all the rest of the data,
right.
So that's the classic thing that the big data or the NoSQL world has not solved yet. I guess my question then for the industry is, you probably understand kind of what the big data systems are able to do, and you're worried about, storing more and more and more data. Are there problems that you're not even bothering with yet because you know that the current systems won't handle it? You need to cross-reference all the data you have to get your answers. I'm just wondering, how big of a problem is that? And obviously there's no solution right now, but there are people that are thinking about it.
I mean, just to clarify a bit, I think that's a great question. When I was talking about big data scalable, I was just emphasizing a simple way of thinking exactly what you just said, that unless you have the software stack, the hardware, the software, and the algorithms all having that property that you can just add infrastructure and tackle bigger problems, then you can't, there's a class of problems like that. I think the challenge, one of the, this is a standard challenge that's been out there for a long time, I'm just going to remind people of it, is algorithms that have the property that they do have these correlations, and these bottlenecks can surprisingly sometimes, through a number of techniques or randomization or other kinds of things, allow you to, through an approximation, have the property that you can sort of create algorithms that are unexpected that allow you to attack problems that didn't seem to have that characteristic before. I didn't say that very elegantly, but I think it's just a nice time if you're doing algorithms in this space to create new classes of algorithms that would have seemed impossible a decade ago. So I think it's a great question you just asked. But I'll throw it out to the audience if they have an algorithm, what's their favorite example of something that didn't look like you could create a scalable solution, but now we do it routinely. You might think about maybe eigenvalues on graphs or something like that at scale, which we now do.
This is for Robert. You'd talked about thinking about compute power in terms of wattage, and I wasn't sure if that was just an example of some thoughts, or if you actually would guide your data center build out based on wattage. One of the reasons it pops up is that flash memory is about an order of magnitude more efficient power-wise than rotating disk, and I just wasn't sure if you were advocating throwing a rotating disk under the bus.
No, it's more the following. When you go to a cocktail party, you want to decide if someone really knows about big data or not. So you have to ask a couple questions to figure out, whether you should talk to them. And the simplest question is, if they think of big data in terms of petabytes, you don't have to talk to them. If they think in terms of megawatts, you should talk to them. And then once you talk to them, you could talk about the most efficient way to consume those megawatts, whether it's solid state or something else. So I just use it as a litmus test.
That's odd. Wouldn't you prefer to think of big data in terms of analysis?
I do. So I mean, or the information or the impact.
The information.
But
and the impact,
point is, if you're trying to build,
you're speaking as a data center.
No, I'm thinking
infrastructure person.
You've got to do the whole thing. If you want to have an impact, you've got to be able to have an infrastructure for the data. You have to be able to have algorithms that scale. You have to be able to figure out a way to operationalize it, and you have to have a strategy. So I sort of think of this diagram, this diamond, where you have strategy, algorithms, operational impact, and infrastructure. And unless you can manage that whole diagram, you can't solve these big data problems. So that's just part of what you need to do.
By the way, a very important theme takeaway is that the algorithms are still the central problem, right? Yes, the scalability and all these technologies and physics are really important to advance, and those are going well, right? It's the algorithms that, frankly, we still need an enormous amount of insight into to figure out how to do this best.
Despite his fascination with P values. Right. Hang on one second. Sure. They're taping, I guess. So.
I found it interesting about your operational stuff. How much is cloud computing allowing you to outsource that? That typically has characteristics of scale and also sharing of usage such that, and I totally believe you about the megawatts, and I get the argument, but most of the people who are thinking about the algorithms shouldn't give a rip about the manifestation of it operationally. Right,
and so I think when I talk about this diagram and talk about the importance of the operation in addition to the algorithm infrastructure and strategy, clearly clouds allow you to outsource. The issue to me is, for a particular community, what is the type of cloud we should have that's optimal for our community, and what's the way we should operationalize that's optimal for our community. Now, of course, we may not have the leisure to do that, and we may have to take suboptimal choices because for various reasons, but at least we can ask that question, and sometimes you can nudge communities in directions that you want in certain ways. And so I agree with you, and I think it's a good time to ask that, because by and large I haven't heard that discussion going on. Though I recognize people in the audience, some of the people are in the midst of these kinds of things.
I think we've got one more question up here, up front.
Just to bring that back around to the visualization question and this next generation sequencer data source, is it fair to say then that with the terabytes of data coming off of next generation sequencers and the desire to do very holistic visualization of the data sets after much data reduction, that private clouds or local clouds are going to be more useful to many of the universities and research labs that are taking data from these devices and using them in practice? Or are public clouds going to be looked at more and more?
Well, I mean, the metric I use is the number of contact hours you have with lawyers. So which is not a bad metric. So if you want to do something immediately with this kind of data,
it's both.
you want to minimize your contact hour with the lawyers, and I love lawyers, but if you want to minimize that, then having a private cloud really makes it much, much easier, because the discussion is relatively simple because of some NIST guidance and other things. So running private clouds is a very simple way to shortchange some of those discussions.
By the way, is it widely understood that the current commercial clouds like AWS, and I would expect Google as well in their new compute infrastructure and others, that the I/O structure and architecture and performance is very different than what you get with a local data center, right? It's very different, and that should be appreciated, and it affects exactly the kinds of algorithms that Titus was talking about, right? How much you touch the data completely changes the economic model of how much it's going to cost you to use that kind of infrastructure. Private clouds can be built with a very different profile, ones that can have any I/O architecture that you like, and a small nuclear private cloud like what you're building and others are building can be extremely different.
So I'm extremely uneasy arguments that academic institutions should ever be regarded as good at running things. And clouds are part of that. And I find there's this weird disconnect. We run our own HPC at MSU. We interact with Exceed and people there, and the incentive structures surrounding these resources are sort of silly at some fundamental level. And I find, you really have to, I mean, I guess I shouldn't need to say this, but the real difference between public and private clouds is the incentive structure is completely different. Right. Private clouds at universities can get away with BS that public clouds cannot get away with in terms of funding models and politics and so on. And those incentives, unfortunately, drive the architecture of the clouds in bad ways in both cases sometimes. So I've had several conversations with people from Google and Microsoft where they say, well, can you somehow figure out how to wedge your problem into our cloud computing infrastructure so you can take advantage of all of the scalability that we've built in this particular way? And the answer is no. And they say, well, could you try really hard? Because we're not changing our data center for you. And I don't really have a conclusion from all of this, except that I think I'm really aiming at Amazon because no biologist I know wants to spend any money up front building that infrastructure, and Amazon will do it for, on a credit card, which is actually quite advantageous for the non-NIH funded projects I work on.
But that's why I tried to turn it around and say, how do we build science clouds for our community with the right IDO, with the right privacy, with the right compliance that serve our community? If we do it university by university, we're going to have problems. If we do it as a community, we have a chance of doing it, and I think it's worth asking that question, how we do it.
And any final plugs? So you're hiring, you hiring?
Always, yes, we are
you hiring?
GNS, yes.
I'm looking for funding.
Okay.
Okay. All right, and on that note, gentlemen, thank you. And would you join me in thanking these gentlemen?